Truth no one tells you about awakening. Welcome to Soul of Life, where we don't chase quick answers, but listen deeply to the quiet truths most people are afraid to face. Here we speak the language of the soul, and sometimes the soul speaks through silence. Somewhere along your path, something shifted. Maybe it wasn't dramatic, maybe it came like a whisper, when the things that once thrilled you started to feel empty. The goals, the love, the recognition, all faded without warning. Everyone said awakening would feel like light, but no one told you it would also feel like losing your place in the world. Not because you failed, but because the old version of you no longer fits. This is the part they never mention, the sacred unraveling, the stillness after the fire. And it is here, not in the clarity, but in the confusion, that your real journey begins. 2. The sacred emptiness. At first, the silence felt like salvation. You stepped out of the fire, thinking you had finally arrived. No more running, no more pretending. You had seen through the performance, the masks, the noise, and for a moment there was peace. But then something shifted again. The spark that once pushed you forward disappeared. Not in a dramatic collapse, but like a candle that quietly burns out. There was no panic, just emptiness. Not sadness, not despair, but a soft kind of vanishing. You weren't just tired of the doing. You were tired of becoming what the world told you to be, tired of chasing identities you never chose. And now, with those layers stripped away, what remained felt almost too quiet. Your goals stopped making sense. The things you once wanted lost their gravity. Even joy, the purest of feelings, seemed distant, like a melody you could no longer hum. You wondered if something was wrong, if you were broken. But Carl Jung would have called this a sacred moment, the chrysalis stage. The part of transformation where the old dissolves and the new hasn't yet taken shape. Where you are no longer the caterpillar, and not yet the butterfly. Only formless, waiting, inside the dark. This isn't apathy. It's not weakness. It's the soul clearing space, scraping away every false desire, until all that's left is truth. And this is where the real work begins. Not in doing more, but in learning how to be with nothing. 3. Beyond apathy. This isn't apathy. But it's easy to mistake it for that, because when the noise quiets and the roles dissolve, what's left can feel hollow. You're not crying. You're not angry. You're not even anxious. You just don't feel like doing anything. And in a world obsessed with movement, this stillness is terrifying. But Jung would remind us, this is not a malfunction, it's a natural response to ego collapse. When the persona loses its grip, and the soul hasn't yet stepped in to lead, motivation fades. Not as a failure, but as a reset. We confuse awakening with euphoria, with fire, with clarity. But for the sensitive ones, for the inward travelers, awakening often feels like extinguishment, because the drive you once had, it wasn't always your own. It was inherited, projected, manufactured by culture, expectation, and fear. And now, in the sacred silence, the ego can no longer push you forward. So you stop, and that stopping feels foreign, even wrong. But what if this stillness isn't emptiness but space? What if it's the soul preparing new soil before planting something real? The world will tell you to get back on track, to be productive, to find a goal and chase it. But your spirit knows better. It doesn't want performance, it wants alignment. And in this quiet, the seeds of that alignment are beginning to stir, beneath the surface, unseen, but not absent. 4. Individuation begins in the void. Carl Jung didn't romanticize this stage. He didn't promise that awakening would lead you straight into light. Instead, he pointed to the void, to the silence, to the space where everything familiar falls away, and nothing has yet taken its place. He called it individuation, not just a process of becoming yourself, but of meeting yourself. The part of you untouched by identity, untouched by praise or failure, untouched by time. But to meet that self, something else must collapse. The scaffolding, the personas, the beliefs you borrowed to survive. And when those begin to crumble, what follows isn't clarity, it's chaos. Soft chaos, quiet chaos, but chaos nonetheless. This is where most people turn back. They misread the void as failure. They try to rebuild the old self, repaint the mask, chase the applause, perform the role. But if you resist that urge, if you stay, you'll begin to notice something deeper rising, a different voice. Not driven by fear, not seeking approval, just honest. That voice doesn't rush, it doesn't pressure. It simply asks, what is real for you now? This is the work of individuation. To live no longer from reflex, but from resonance. To let go of everything you thought you had to be, so you can finally return to who you truly are. Not for show, not for success, but for truth. And it always, always begins in the dark. 5. The ego didn't die, it just lost the script. Let's be clear, the ego didn't die, it simply lost the script. You were taught who to be, how to smile, when to achieve, what to chase. And for a long time, the ego played along. It followed the rules, it sought approval, it survived by becoming what the world demanded. But awakening burned the pages, and now the ego stands on a stage with no lines, no direction, and an audience that no longer matters. So it panics. Not because it's evil, but because it doesn't know who it is without performance. And that panic, it feels like apathy. It feels like fatigue. It feels like drifting through fog. But drifting isn't the same as being lost. It's what happens when the old map no longer leads anywhere worth going. You didn't lose your motivation, you outgrew the fuel that once powered it. The ambition that once lit a fire in your chest was based on becoming someone. Now, you're being called to unbecome, to return to what's real beneath the striving. And that requires a kind of courage no one applauds. The courage to be still when everyone else is performing. The courage to listen, even when you can't yet hear anything clear. The ego hasn't vanished, it's just waiting for a new script, one written by the soul, not by society. And that script begins in silence. 6. Don't misdiagnose this pause. We live in a culture that glorifies movement. If you're not building something, proving something, achieving something, you're told you're falling behind. So when your soul calls you into stillness, the world calls it laziness. When you stop chasing, they say you've lost your drive. But this pause you're in, it's not dysfunction. It's not regression. It's a recalibration. Carl Jung warned us, modern life is terrified of the void. It pathologizes any space where production halts. And so we medicate stillness, distract ourselves from silence, and try to fix what was never broken. But you're not broken. You're in between. You've stepped out of the false self, but the true self hasn't fully arrived. And in that space, the silence feels loud. But don't rush to fill it. Don't diagnose it as failure. Don't run from what is sacred just because it's unfamiliar. This is the chrysalis, not collapse. This is the space where transformation does its slow, invisible work, where the soul rebuilds the foundation, brick by brick, truth by truth. The world will tell you to be visible, be loud, be certain, but your soul is asking something else. Be patient, be empty, be still. Because what's coming next cannot be forced, it must be born. 7. The real work begins. This is where the real work begins, not in chasing clarity, but in holding space for the unknown. You won't wake up with a lightning bolt of purpose. You won't hear a trumpet calling you forward. What arrives instead is quieter, subtler, a hum beneath the noise. It isn't motivation the way you knew it. Not adrenaline, not deadlines, not applause. It's something older, something slower. Like the pull of gravity that only your soul can feel. You start to move, not because you must, but because it would be a betrayal of yourself not to. You begin to speak, not to convince, but to express what is finally real. You create, not to prove anything, but because creation itself feels like breathing. This is not drive, this is devotion. And strangely, it leads you forward, softly, steadily, without effort, yet with depth. The self does not shout, it whispers. And when you finally learn to trust that whisper, you stop performing, and you start participating. You stop chasing life, and you begin to live it, not as someone you're supposed to be, but as the truth you've always carried. 8. You're not lost. You're reconfiguring, so if you've been staring into the quiet, wondering where your spark went, know this. It's not gone. It's simply being remade. The fire that once came from fear, ambition, or needing to be enough, it burned bright, but it was never meant to last. Now something deeper is emerging. Not a roar, not a mission, but a pulse. The kind that doesn't push, it pulls. You are not lost, you are being reconfigured, not to return to who you were, but to become who you've always been, underneath it all. And no, there is no map for this path, there are no steps to follow, but there is a rhythm, and if you listen closely, it's already inside you. So take your time. Trust the stillness, and when you're ready, let the next step rise to meet you, not out of pressure, but out of peace. If this message found you at the right moment, if it spoke to something wordless inside you, you're not alone. This is Soul of Life, a place where we journey inward, to remember the truths we were never taught, but always knew. If you felt seen, let your presence be known in the comments. Even a few words might light the way for someone else still walking in the dark. And if you want to keep exploring these quiet truths, you know what to do. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and meet us here, where silence speaks and your soul listens.